Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at Atomic Habits by James Clear. We're
Yeah,
going to be kind of picking it apart and really kind of seeing what we can glean from this book about forming good habits and breaking bad ones.
right.
And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have some tools and some strategies to help you make some changes in your own life.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about this book is that it really positions habits as like a system for change,
Yeah.
and it talks about this concept of tiny gains, like these seemingly insignificant improvements we make every day, but how they can compound over time to produce really remarkable
Right.
results.
Yeah, and he uses a lot of analogies about the whole thing about compound interest,
Right.
which, we usually think of with finances, right? Like that's how you build wealth.
Yeah.
But the same principle can be applied to habits as well.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful ones he uses is this visual of an ice cube sitting at 25 degrees, and you slowly raise the temperature 1 degree at a time for a while. Nothing seems to happen.
Right.
Then, bam, at 32 degrees, that ice suddenly melts. And it's just this powerful visual for how consistent effort can lead to these like breakthroughs,
Yeah.
even when we don't see immediate progress.
Yeah. And it's a great reminder to be patient and to trust the process. Um, but how do we actually go about like building those positive habits?
Well, Clear breaks down habit formation into 4 stages:
Okay.
cue, craving, response, and reward.
Okay.
Think of it like a feedback loop.
Got it.
First, there's the cue, something that triggers the habit. It could be seeing your running shoes by the door or smelling freshly brewed coffee.
Okay. So like a visual or sensory cue
Exactly.
that kind of triggers that.
Right. And then that leads to the craving, which is the desire for the reward that's associated with the habit. So for the runner, it might be that feeling of energized after a run, or for the coffee drinker, enjoying that first sip of coffee.
That feeling you get. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that craving leads to the response, which is the actual habit itself. So you put on your running shoes and you head out the door, or you pour yourself a cup of coffee.
Take the action.
Yeah, and then finally the reward, which reinforces that entire loop,
Right. Yeah.
makes you more likely to repeat that habit in the future.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. But I sometimes feel like I'm just running on autopilot, like
Yeah.
just going through the motions without really being aware of my habits.
And Clear addresses this by introducing what he calls the habit scorecard,
Okay.
which is a simple but really powerful tool for just increasing your awareness of your daily routines.
Okay.
Essentially, you just list out all of your daily habits and you categorize them as positive, negative, or neutral.
Got it.
And that helps you identify those mindless habits that might be holding you back.
Okay, so you bring those to the forefront.
Yeah. It's kind of based on this point and call system that's used by Japanese railway conductors,
Okay.
where they literally point at and call out every signal and action, even after years of experience.
Wow.
It might seem strange, but this practice helps them stay focused, avoid errors.
Interesting.
So the habit scorecard is your way of pointing and calling your own actions, bringing those autopilot habits into the forefront of your awareness.
Yeah, I like that it's like taking inventory of your actions and making those unconscious habits more visible.
Exactly. Have you ever tried anything like that?
Not exactly a habit scorecard, but I have like kept a food journal before,
Okay.
to just kind of be more mindful of my eating habits. So I can definitely see how that same principle could be applied to other areas of my life.
Absolutely. And, Clear argues that environment plays a significant role in shaping our behavior. He even uses this simple equation to illustrate this: B equals F of P, E, meaning behavior is a function of both the person and their environment.
So we're not just talking about like our physical environment, but also our social environment.
Yeah.
The people we surround ourselves with.
Exactly. Yeah, he gives this fascinating example of a cafeteria redesign at Massachusetts General Hospital. And simply by rearranging the placement of food items, they were able to nudge people towards healthier choices.
I've heard about this.
Yeah, it just highlights the subtle but powerful ways our environment can influence our decisions.
Right. Like if you're trying to cut back on sugary drinks, it's probably not a good idea to keep a case of soda in the fridge.
Right. Make those good choices, the easy choices.
Yeah.
Cleary suggests making the cues for good habits obvious and the cues for bad habits invisible. Want to read more? Put a book on your pillow. Trying to cut back on social media, move those apps off your home screen. So think about your own environment. What are some small tweaks you could make?
Well, I definitely need to like declutter my workspace
Okay.
to eliminate distractions.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that gets sidetracked by, a stray pen
Yeah.
or a pile of papers.
Sure.
And I need that clear space to focus.
Yeah, that's a great start. It's amazing how much friction we can remove from our lives just by making those simple adjustments to our surroundings. Clear also emphasizes the importance of creating dedicated spaces for specific activities.
Oh, I like that. So, for example, if you work from home, having a designated workspace
Yes.
so
Yeah.
you don't end up, blurring the lines between your professional and personal life.
Precisely by having those clear boundaries, you make it easier to slip into the right mindset and minimize distractions.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
So we've talked about environment and making those good habits, you know, easier to adopt. But what about those habits that just aren't inherently enjoyable,
Right.
like flossing or paying bills?
Yeah.
How do we make those stick?
Well, Clear suggests this strategy called habit shaping, where you start with like a ridiculously easy version of the habit,
Okay.
and you gradually increase the difficulty over time. It's
Yeah.
like building a muscle.
Yeah.
You wouldn't start with the heaviest weight. You
Right.
would work your way up gradually.
So instead of aiming to floss all your teeth, you might start by just flossing one.
Exactly. The idea is to make that initial step so small that it feels almost impossible to fail. It's a way of tricking your brain into starting that habit loop
Right.
without feeling overwhelmed. And once that tiny habit becomes ingrained, then you can slowly increase the scope.
It's like that old saying, how to eat an elephant,
Yeah.
one bite at a time.
Precisely. Clear also highlights the importance of making those first 2 minutes of a habit as easy as possible.
Yeah.
He calls it the 2-minute rule.
The 2-minute rule.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you heard of that?
I have, yeah. And that actually reminds me of something I've struggled with, like getting myself to meditate regularly.
Yeah.
I know it's good for me, but it always feels like such a chore to get started.
Yeah, I think the 2-minute rule could be really helpful for you there. Instead
Yeah.
of aiming for a 20-minute meditation session,
Right.
just start with 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Focus on simply sitting down and closing your eyes.
Uh-huh.
The key is to make starting the habit effortless.
Yeah. That's actually a really good idea because it takes away that initial resistance
Mm-hmm.
that I always seem to face. I'm definitely going to try that. I think you'll be surprised how effective it can be. And once you overcome that initial inertia, it's much easier to keep going.
Right.
Clear talks about this idea of decisive moments.
Okay.
Those forks in the road where we choose between a productive action and an unproductive one.
It's like when you're debating whether to hit the snooze button or get up and go for that run.
Exactly. And by making the good choice the easier choice, we increase the likelihood of repeating it.
That makes sense.
So, in addition to making good habits easy, Clear also stresses the importance of making them satisfying.
Right, because we're more likely to repeat a behavior when we associate it with positive feelings.
Yes.
But how do we make those less than thrilling habits like, paying bills or doing our taxes feel more enjoyable?
Well, Clear suggests a technique called temptation bundling,
Temptation bundling. Okay, I like that.
where you link an action you want to do
Okay.
with an action you need to do.
Oh, so I could only allow myself to listen to my favorite podcast
Yes.
while I'm cleaning the house.
Precisely by pairing something you enjoy with something you might otherwise avoid. You make that latter more appealing.
That's a good strategy.
It's all about finding ways to kind of hack your brain's reward system.
Right.
Another strategy is using visual measures of progress.
Visual progress trackers.
Oh, yeah.
I've always found those motivating.
Me too.
It's like, filling in a coloring book
Yes.
as you get closer to your goal.
Exactly. And Claire points out that visual measures can be especially helpful for habits where the results aren't immediately noticeable. It's
Mhm.
about finding ways to track your progress in a tangible way, whether it's using a habit tracker, marking off days on a calendar, even creating a visual representation of your savings goal. Anything that gives you that sense of accomplishment
Right.
and keeps you motivated.
It reminds me of those fundraising thermometers they use for charities.
Yeah,
You could see the progress toward the goal,
right.
and it creates that sense of momentum.
And that sense of gamification can be really powerful. Clear also talks about the importance of celebrating small wins.
I love that because, let's face it, sometimes those big long-term goals can feel so overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So celebrating those milestones along the way, I think really helps to keep you going.
Absolutely. It's about acknowledging your efforts and giving yourself credit for the progress you're making.
Right.
It reinforces that positive association with the habit and makes you more likely to stick with it. Clear suggests building a habit of reflection into your routine.
So it's not just about like blindly following a system, but it's about regularly, assessing your progress.
Yeah.
And making adjustments as needed.
Precisely. He recommends setting aside some time each week to review your habits, see what's working, what's not, and make any necessary course corrections.
Uh-huh.
This helps you stay on track, adapt to changing circumstances, and just ensure that your habits are still serving you well.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being intentional with our habits
Mhm.
and making sure they're aligned with, our goals and values.
Mhm.
But, sometimes I feel like my biggest obstacle isn't external.
Okay.
It's internal. It's those like limiting beliefs and that negative self-talk
Sure.
that holds me back.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Clear addresses that head on.
Okay.
He talks about how our habits shape our identity and vice versa.
Oh, interesting.
If you constantly tell yourself, I'm not a morning person,
Right.
you're less likely to successfully establish a morning routine.
Right. So it's about shifting those beliefs to align with the kind of person we want to be.
Exactly.
If I want to be a writer, I need to start believing I am a writer.
Yeah, the more we act in accordance with a particular identity, the more we reinforce that belief.
That makes sense.
Clear even suggests using affirmations to kind of strengthen that connection between our actions and our desired identity.
So it's like rewiring those neural pathways
Mm-hmm.
and creating a stronger association between who we are and what we do.
Precisely. And Clear encourages us to identify our natural talents and build habits that leverage those strengths. It's about finding those areas where we can excel with less effort and more enjoyment.
So, he actually suggests creating a skill tree
Right.
to kind of map out our strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and then choose habits that align with those areas where we naturally shine.
It's about choosing your battles wisely
Yeah.
and focusing your energy on the areas where you can create the most impact. But it's important to remember that even when we choose the right habits, setbacks are inevitable.
Yeah.
We're all human and we're going to stumble along the way.
Right. So it's not about being perfect. It's about having a system for getting back on track when you fall off the wagon.
Exactly. Clear encourages us to view setbacks as learning opportunities, not failures.
Okay.
It's about refining our approach, strengthening our resolve, and just getting back in the game.
Mm-hmm.
He even suggests creating a failure plan to anticipate potential obstacles and develop strategies for overcoming them.
Oh, that's such a great idea. It's like having a contingency plan in place. So you're not caught off guard when things inevitably go wrong.
Precisely. It's about being proactive and having a system in place to navigate those challenges and get back on track as quickly as possible.
That has been so insightful.
Good.
It's really reframing my whole perspective on habit formation.
Hmm.
One of the things I really appreciate about Atomic Habits, is how Cleary uses all these real-world examples to illustrate his points.
Mm.
It makes these concepts so much more relatable and memorable.
Yeah, absolutely. He has this knack for weaving together like scientific research with these compelling anecdotes. Like, for example, he shares this story about John H. Patterson, the founder of the National Cash Register Company
Okay.
back in the late 1800s.
Okay.
And Patterson was facing this major problem with employee theft.
Yeah.
Back then, there was no reliable way to track transactions.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a tricky situation.
It was a huge problem, and then he stumbled upon this new invention, the first cash register.
A cash register.
And it totally revolutionized the way businesses operated.
I bet, yeah. Suddenly there's a record of every transaction.
Exactly. And the impact was almost immediate. Employee theft plummeted simply because it became so much harder to get away with.
Right. They couldn't get away with it anymore.
Yeah. And it just perfectly illustrates how making a bad habit impractical can be so incredibly effective.
It's like cutting it off at the source.
Yeah.
Another example that really stuck with me was that story about the Safeguard soap in Pakistan.
Oh, yes. That's a great illustration of how making a habit satisfying can lead to lasting change.
Right.
Apparently, Safeguard was considered a premium soap there.
Okay.
And people just found it more enjoyable to use than regular soap.
So they actually look forward to washing their hands.
It seems that way. And, this seemingly small shift led to a significant decrease in diarrheal diseases.
Wow.
It highlights the ripple effect that even these subtle changes in behavior can create.
Yeah, it's fascinating how something so simple as making a habit more enjoyable can have such a profound impact. And speaking of simple but effective, I have to bring up the 2-minute rule again.
It's a game changer.
It is.
The idea is you break down any new habit into a version that takes less than 2 minutes to do.
Right. So instead of saying, I'm going to write a novel, you start by saying, I'm going to write for 2 minutes each day.
Exactly. It lowers the barrier to entry and makes those first steps feel almost effortless.
Yeah. And once you've started, you're much more likely to keep going.
Yeah, you build that momentum.
Yeah. I think that principle can be applied to so many areas of life. I'm picturing someone who wants to start like a workout routine,
Mm-hmm.
but they feel really intimidated by the thought of, a full hour at the gym.
Oh, yeah.
They could just start by putting on their workout clothes
Yeah,
and doing a few stretches for 2 minutes
exactly.
just to get started.
Make it less daunting.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Clear also talks about the power of visual feedback, right?
He does. He shares this study where researchers wanted to encourage people to conserve energy. And in one group, they simply provided information about the benefits of energy conservation,
Okay.
but it didn't really change people's behavior.
Because information alone isn't always enough to motivate us.
Right. However, in another group, they installed a device that displayed real-time feedback on energy usage.
Oh, interesting.
So people could instantly see how much energy they were consuming.
So they had that visual representation of their impact.
Yeah.
I bet that made a difference.
It did. People in that group started using less energy almost immediately.
Wow.
It's a great reminder that visual feedback can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah, it's like those fitness trackers that show you your steps and calories burned.
Right.
Makes it tangible.
Makes it real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and speaking of motivation, Clear also emphasizes the importance of accountability.
Oh, yes. Accountability.
He even suggests creating a habit contract to kind of formalize your commitments
Right.
and add some external consequences for not following through.
He shares that story about Brian Harris, the entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to lose weight and get in shape.
Yeah.
And he created this contract with his wife and trainer
Mm-hmm.
and even agreed to like financial penalties if he didn't meet his goals.
It might seem extreme, but it clearly worked for him.
It did.
He achieved his fitness goals and has maintained those habits.
So it shows how powerful a little bit of external pressure can be.
It can be huge.
It's like having a personal cheerleader in your corner.
Yes.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? What are some key takeaways, that they can apply into their own lives?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that small changes consistently applied can lead to remarkable results.
Yeah.
It's not about making these drastic overnight transformations. It's about embracing the power of tiny gains and building those positive habits one step at a time.
Yeah, it's about focusing on the process, not just the outcome,
Exactly.
and celebrating those small wins along the way.
Absolutely. Remember, building better habits is a journey, not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
There will be bumps along the way. But with the right systems in place, you can navigate those challenges and continue moving forward.
Right. It all starts with taking that first step, no matter how small. So we'll leave you with this. What is one small habit you can start building today? And how can you make it easy, attractive, and satisfying, especially in those first 2 minutes?
Good question.
Remember, even the tiniest actions repeated consistently can compound over time and create a ripple effect that transforms your life. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure diving into Atomic Habits with you.